Theme park rules exist for a reason, but these tourists thought they knew better, turning a regular day at the park into the ultimate one-way ride. From a woman who lied about her heart condition just to ride a high-speed coaster to a guest who climbed a fence just for a sunset photo and met the worst fate possible. Hi, it's Timothy, and this is Last Memories. It was the afternoon of 9th August 2019 at a crowded water park outside Branson. Families packed the walkways trying to escape the late summer heat. Ray Cutler was 44 and worked maintenance for an HVAC contractor. He had been married 3 times in 2 years and was going through his 3rd divorce. Most of his money disappeared into legal fees and child support. His apartment still had unpacked boxes. He could not really afford the trip, but bought the tickets anyway after missing 2 scheduled visitation weekends earlier that summer. He hoped the weekend would give him a chance to reconnect with his daughter after months of barely seeing her. Mia was 17 and obsessed with wave pools and water rides. She had spent the previous month talking about the park after seeing commercials online. Ray picked up extra night work for nearly 3 weeks just to cover the hotel, gas, and admission passes. That mattered. I want you to hold on to that detail. He worked so hard just to give her one good weekend. That is who Ray was trying to be that day. By late afternoon, both were worn out. Temperatures had stayed above 90 degrees. Mia still wanted to ride everything one last time before they left, and Ray kept saying yes. After nearly 9 hours inside the park, they started walking toward the outer exit paths near the back of the park. The main walkway near the ride became heavily congested after a temporary ride stoppage farther up the park. Guests spilled into nearby paths while employees redirected crowds around maintenance carts and closed sections. Ray noticed a narrow service corridor beside a maintenance fence partially hidden behind artificial rocks. A waist-high gate marked employees only blocked the passage. The latch had apparently been left unsecured earlier that morning after inspection work. Ray pushed the gate open and stepped through, assuming it connected to another guest path near the parking area. Mia hesitated and pointed at the warning sign, but Ray shrugged it off and kept walking. At 17, she understood it was restricted, but after a long, exhausting day, she followed anyway. The corridor narrowed behind the Flume building where machinery echoed through concrete walls. Large pumps recycled thousands of gallons of water beneath the ride every minute. Beside the path ran an open return channel carrying water back toward the drainage intake system. It looked shallow but moved far faster underneath than either realized. Ray stepped sideways when he noticed the drop ahead. Mia moved around him to look and slipped on algae buildup near the edge. The current pulled her into the channel before Ray could react. She disappeared underwater almost immediately as the flow dragged her downstream. Ray lunged and briefly caught her wrist, but the pressure of the water tore her away. Ray jumped in after her without thinking. The concrete beneath the water was slick, and he immediately lost footing. The current carried both of them toward the submerged intake system. Mia struck the concrete wall as the channel tightened. Ray was pulled after her as the force of the water pinned them deeper into the confined drainage corridor. A maintenance worker later noticed the gate standing open and realized something was wrong. Emergency services were contacted immediately, but shutting down the pump system required multiple staged procedures and manual overrides. By the time rescue crews reached the downstream culvert, Mia had become trapped against a submerged grate where water funneled into the pump system. Ray was found farther back near a secondary junction after apparently trying to reach her. Both had drowned long before rescuers could safely access the corridor. Investigators later confirmed the maintenance gate had been left unsecured following earlier inspection work. The affected section of the park was temporarily closed while safety procedures around restricted access areas were reviewed. Mia's mother later filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the park, which was eventually settled privately. Every case so far involves someone making a split-second decision in the moment. The next one is different because this man planned his way around the safety system weeks in advance. And he did it to impress a girl he had just met. It was the evening of June 22, 2017, when Cody Lee arrived at a park outside Cincinnati, Ohio, determined not to let his height embarrass him again. Cody was 27 and worked as an assistant manager at an electronics store in Dayton. He stood barely 5'4" and had spent most of his adult life overcompensating for his height. In high school, a coach said he needed size for basketball. A supervisor later said customers preferred taller staff. By his mid-20s, he had become obsessed with appearing larger. He bought elevator shoes and exaggerated his height on dating profiles by 2 inches. Dates lost interest after meeting him in person. 3 weeks earlier, Cody matched with 24-year-old Flora Bennett, who had always wanted to ride one of the park's biggest roller coasters, but never found anyone willing to join her. Cody immediately bought tickets for a Saturday night visit. The ride's restraints required riders to fit within a specific height and shoulder range. Guests whose upper body position sat too low could experience excessive movement during inversions. Cody narrowly failed the test seat on his first attempt, with the indicator stopping just outside the approved range. On the morning of the date, Cody drove 40 minutes to an outdoor supply store and bought heavy hiking boots with oversized soles and rigid ankle support for $200. The added height and stiff posture slightly changed the way he sat during the fit check and helped him push himself higher into the restraint. The boots became uncomfortable after several hours of walking through the park and subtly affected the way he sat once he boarded the ride. Flora noticed him limping near the entrance and asked if he was okay. Cody blamed the heat. And here is what I find so hard about this one. He failed the safety check fair and square, but he wanted to please his date by all means. By sunset, the roller coaster line stretched past 90 minutes. At the loading platform, Cody carefully straightened his back and pushed his shoulders upward during the fit check until the attendant finally approved him. Inside the station, he chose the outer seat because Flora said it looked more intense. The restraint settled slightly higher than intended after locking, and the train dispatched moments later. The coaster accelerated from 0 to nearly 60 miles per hour before entering a steep rollover inversion. The first sequence of inversions subjected riders to intense positive and lateral G-forces. Almost immediately, Cody's head began striking the padded sides of the restraint during rapid transitions. Because the harness did not sit correctly, his neck absorbed substantially more movement than intended during each inversion. Repeated lateral transitions produced abnormal head and neck movement throughout the ride cycle. During one of the high-speed transition elements near the midpoint, Cody suffered a traumatic vertebral artery dissection and severe cervical soft tissue injury caused by repeated abnormal neck motion while improperly positioned inside the restraint system. By the time the train entered the mid-course brake run, Cody had already lost consciousness. Several riders later stated that Cody appeared unusually limp or unresponsive during the middle portion, though most assumed he was overwhelmed by the intensity. When the train returned, ride operators initially believed he had fainted. Emergency medical personnel removed him from the train approximately 6 minutes later. Cody was transported to a regional trauma center, but died shortly afterward from traumatic brain swelling and complications from the cervical vascular injury. Flora later told investigators she initially believed Cody had simply passed out from the intensity of the ride and did not realize how badly he had been injured until paramedics began emergency treatment on the platform. The state investigation concluded that the coaster had functioned properly and that the fatal injuries resulted from deliberate circumvention of the ride's posted rider fit restrictions. Cody spent $200 and drove across town to get on that ride. The next guy didn't even do that much. He just refused to put his backpack in a locker, and that decision ended up affecting people who had nothing to do with any of it. It was the morning of September 3rd, 2016, at a crowded adventure park during a busy holiday weekend. Dale Pruitt was 38 years old and worked as a restaurant manager for a sports bar chain. After months of overtime and late-night shifts, his supervisor forced him to take 3 days off after he nearly fell asleep during a meeting. Dale chose to spend the first day at a theme park because he could not remember the last time he had done anything besides work, laundry, or sleep. Dale arrived carrying a black hiking backpack stuffed with everything he normally kept in his car. Inside were his wallet, phone, portable charger, 2 water bottles, and several $100s in cash. He had also brought paperwork related to a scheduling dispute with corporate. The park's newest attraction was a launched steel roller coaster. Park policy required all loose items to be stored in paid lockers before entering the queue. Warning signs were posted at the ride entrance, outside the station, and near the loading gates. Dale had spent nearly an hour online reading complaints from people convinced theme parks intentionally designed locker systems to confuse guests. By the time he reached the station platform, he had already decided he would keep the backpack with him regardless of the rules. When the restraint attendant told him the bag could not go on the ride, Dale became argumentative almost immediately. And I get it. Locker fees feel like a money grab. I've thought the same thing standing in those lines. But what he did next is where it stops being relatable. The attendant called a floor supervisor. After several minutes of discussion, Dale appeared to cooperate and stepped aside near the exit gate. Once the next train began loading, he slipped back through the open boarding gate and hurried into an empty rear seat before staff noticed he still had the backpack. The restraint attendant saw the bag only seconds before dispatch. He shouted for Dale to remove it, but Dale pulled the shoulder straps tight against his chest. The operator initiated an emergency stop command, but the train had already dispatched before the supervisor could reach the row. The coaster launched at approximately 11:42 a.m. Less than 2 seconds into the launch, one of the backpack's shoulder straps slipped free from Dale's right shoulder. As the train entered its first high-speed transition, the second strap slid loose. The backpack separated completely and flew behind the moving train. Dale instinctively twisted sideways to look back at it. The bag struck a lower maintenance area and burst open on impact. Water bottles and paperwork scattered across the restricted access walkway below the track. The coaster operated on a dual train block system. Approximately 15 seconds later, the second train dispatched from the station. The operator had no direct visual line to the maintenance area. As the second train passed over the section, the loose backpack became lodged near a trackside sensor and triggered a fault in the ride control system. The coaster automatically activated a safety braking sequence designed to stop trains when abnormal readings were detected. The deceleration was considerably harsher than riders expected. Several passengers were thrown sideways against restraint padding. Dale, who was still partially twisted in his seat when the emergency brakes engaged, suffered severe rotational trauma to his upper cervical spine. The left side of his head struck the restraint frame during the sudden deceleration. He lost consciousness before the train fully stopped. Emergency medical personnel arrived within minutes. Dale was transported by helicopter to a regional trauma center where doctors identified severe upper cervical spinal injuries accompanied by swelling around the brainstem. Dale died later that evening. The park temporarily closed the ride during the investigation and later faced multiple lawsuits from riders injured during the emergency braking sequence. The next one is a family story, and what makes it different is that his family was right there, watching him make every single decision in real time, and nobody could stop him. It was the afternoon of the 11th of July, 2015 at a crowded adventure park outside Branson, where families packed the walkways trying to escape the summer heat. Raymond Doucette was 43 years old and owned a struggling roofing business. Delayed projects and unpaid clients had drained most of his savings while he fought to keep his employees working. The family trip to Missouri had already been canceled twice before his wife secretly booked it after realizing their sons had stopped asking whether they were still going. The moment they arrived, Raymond became obsessed with making the weekend feel worth the money. He bought overpriced food without complaining, paid extra for front-of-line passes they barely used, and refused to leave rides early no matter how long the waits became. By late afternoon, temperatures had climbed into the 90s while dark storm clouds gathered west of the park. And honestly, I understand that mindset more than I want to admit. When you've sacrificed to give your family something special, leaving early can feel like admitting the whole thing was a mistake. The line for the park's signature water ride already stretched past 90 minutes when the Doucette family reached the loading area. Raymond spent most of the wait talking about the 6-hour drive and how ridiculous it would be to leave without riding it. His 16-year-old nephew Tyler tagged along and mostly laughed at the argument building around him. At approximately 4:47 p.m., park staff initiated an emergency weather shutdown after lightning alerts detected storm activity within 5 miles of the property. Ride attendants moved through the queue, ordering guests to evacuate immediately, while operators began clearing rafts from the channel. The Doucette family's raft had already reached the loading section. Employees instructed Raymond and the remaining passengers to step out so the evacuation could continue. Raymond refused. He argued that Missouri storms happened every afternoon and insisted the ride would probably reopen within minutes. A supervisor explained that company policy required immediate shutdown once lightning entered the restricted radius. But Raymond still refused to leave the raft. His wife eventually stepped onto the unloading platform with their younger son after another visible lightning strike flashed nearby. Raymond stayed seated beside Tyler, who recorded parts of the confrontation on his phone. Staff eventually stopped arguing and focused on clearing the remaining sections before the storm arrived. At 5:02 p.m., lightning struck a transformer connected to the ride's circulation systems. Power failed across most of the attraction almost instantly. The primary pumps shut down, but large amounts of water already moving through the elevated channels continued rushing toward lower sections for several minutes. Without balanced circulation, water levels rose unevenly in narrower parts of the ride. The raft carrying Raymond and Tyler drifted sideways near a concrete narrowing point and became pinned against a maintenance barrier. Water pressure quickly increased around the disabled raft. Within minutes, it was forced beneath a low steel maintenance catwalk that crossed over the channel. Tyler climbed onto the side railing first and managed to pull himself onto the maintenance platform. Raymond attempted to stand seconds later as the raft shifted violently beneath him. He lost his footing, struck the underside of the steel structure head first, and fell back into the fast-moving channel. Emergency crews reached the area approximately 11 minutes later after flood control systems were manually disabled. Raymond Doucette was recovered beneath the overturned raft near the lower drainage section of the ride. He died from blunt force head trauma and drowning before rescue crews could remove him from the channel. Tyler and the rest of the family were treated for minor injuries and shock after the evacuation. The ride remained closed for several days while investigators reviewed the storm shutdown procedures and emergency response timeline surrounding the incident. Raymond ignored a lightning warning because he didn't want the trip to feel wasted. The next person I'm covering ignored something completely different, a medical warning from her own doctor, and she did it because she didn't want to feel old. It was the afternoon of July 18, 2019, at a park in Dayton, Ohio. The park was busy with summer crowds, and the newer attractions had lines stretching past their queue barriers. Paula Hendricks was 46 years old and worked as an assistant manager at a regional grocery store. 18 months earlier, she had collapsed during a treadmill workout and was diagnosed with a dangerous heart rhythm disorder. Doctors implanted an internal cardioverter defibrillator near her left shoulder and warned her to avoid intense rides and sudden acceleration forces. By the summer of 2019, Paula had started telling people she was basically normal again, though she still attended regular cardiac follow-up appointments. The trip had been her sister Denise's idea. Denise had recently finalized a divorce and wanted one carefree day before returning to work. Paula almost declined, but agreed after Denise joked they were becoming old women before 50. That joke is what got her on the ride. And I think about how many decisions in these cases came down to something that small. At the park, Paula wore a loose gray shirt that covered the slight outline of the device beneath her collarbone. Several rides posted warnings for guests with heart conditions or implanted cardiac devices. Denise noticed Paula reading the signs longer than usual before stepping into line anyway. The Skyhammer entrance board listed cardiovascular disorders and implanted defibrillators as disqualifying conditions. Guests completed a digital waiver before boarding. Paula selected no for every condition without hesitating. She told Denise that doctors always exaggerated to avoid lawsuits. The ride launched at nearly 70 miles per hour before entering a sequence of inversions and high-force turns. Witnesses said Paula appeared calm through most of the experience. When the train rolled back into the unloading station, she did not reach for the restraint release. She turned to Denise and said quietly that her chest felt strange and her heartbeat did not feel right. Denise assumed it was adrenaline and told her to give it a second. Before the restraint bar unlocked, Paula lost consciousness in her seat. Ride operators initially suspected heat exhaustion until her body jolted visibly as the implanted defibrillator delivered a shock inside her chest. Emergency personnel reached the platform within minutes. The device delivered a second shock while paramedics attempted resuscitation beside the train. Neither shock restored a stable rhythm. Paula Hendricks was pronounced dead at the scene. The medical examiner recorded her cause of death as fatal cardiac arrhythmia resulting from cardiovascular stress induced by high G-force exposure in a patient with a pre-existing heart rhythm disorder and an implanted defibrillator. Park investigators reviewed the digital waiver Paula had completed before boarding. Every disqualifying condition had been marked as not applicable. The park received no citations. Investigators concluded the ride's warning systems had functioned correctly and that the waiver had been completed dishonestly by the guest. Every person in this video made a decision they thought was low risk. This last case is different because she didn't think the risk was low. She just decided that proving a point mattered more than what happened after. It was the evening of August 18, 2018, at an amusement pier in Richmond, British Columbia. The waterfront park was packed with tourists and teenagers enjoying a humid summer night along the pier. 32-year-old Imelda Chu was an office administrator for a shipping company in Richmond. People who knew her well described her as the kind of person who turned small disagreements into contests she had to win. If someone told her not to do something in public, her first instinct was never to think it over. It was to prove them wrong on the spot. That quality had gotten her into arguments her whole life. On this particular night, it got her killed. Imelda had spent the earlier part of the evening at a co-worker's birthday dinner nearby, before heading to the pier with two longtime friends. By the time the group joined the line for Vortex Run, it was late, and they had already been walking for hours. Security footage showed all three of them laughing and filming each other on their phones while they waited. Vortex Run was a steel coaster built out over the water. It was not especially tall, but it was fast, with sharp turns and aggressive direction changes built into a tight layout. Every rider was secured with both a lap bar and a separate seat belt. Warning signs were posted throughout the queue. A recorded announcement repeated the same instructions before every dispatch. While waiting in the station, one of Imelda's friends joked that the seatbelt seemed pointless since the lap bar already locked down hard. Imelda said the park overdid everything just to avoid lawsuits. That joke turned into a back and forth about whether someone could physically stand up mid-ride if they actually wanted to. And I want to pause here, because I've heard that exact conversation at theme parks before. Most people say it and then sit down and ride normally. Imelda decided to find out. Attendants checked every restraint before dispatch. Investigators later believed Imelda had intentionally left extra space beneath the lap bar during the restraint check by positioning herself slightly forward in the seat. They also believed she had loosely fastened the secondary seat belt instead of tightening it fully against her waist. Witnesses nearby noticed her pulling experimentally against the restraint while the train was still sitting in the station. The lap bar itself remained locked normally, but the additional gap gave her enough room to raise her hips and torso far higher than the restraint system was designed to allow once the ride started. As the train climbed the first lift hill, Imelda laughed and told her friend to watch. She pushed upward against the restraint and lifted herself partially out of the seat, using both hands against the lap bar. While the train was still running straight, it almost looked like it was working. That few seconds of success was the worst thing that could have happened, because it convinced her the restraints had been unnecessary all along. The train entered its first high-speed banked turn seconds later. The sudden lateral force shifted Imelda sideways before she could brace herself properly. Passengers nearby heard screaming almost immediately as operators triggered an emergency stop from the control booth. It was too late. Imelda lost secure contact with the seat during the turn, fell from the car, and struck a lower section of the steel support structure below. She was pronounced dead at the scene. Investigators confirmed no mechanical failure of any kind. Every restraint worked exactly as it was built to work. The report stated plainly that the accident resulted entirely from deliberate interference with safety equipment by the rider. Imelda tested the restraints because she'd already decided they were pointless. The next one wasn't testing anything. She just needed a better angle for a sunset photo and climbed a fence to get it. This one I found genuinely hard to read. It was the evening of October 27th, 2018, at a crowded fantasy-themed amusement park outside Orlando, Florida, during Halloween festivities. Brianna Morales was a 22-year-old retail employee from Tampa who had spent most of her free time posting travel photos and short lifestyle videos online. Friends described her as outgoing, adventurous, and obsessed with capturing perfect pictures everywhere she went. Although she only had a modest social media following, Brianna treated every outing like an opportunity to create content that looked cinematic and carefully planned. She especially loved amusement parks because of their lighting, themed architecture, and dramatic nighttime scenery. During October 2018, she visited several Halloween events across Florida after noticing that dark fantasy aesthetics and sunset photography were performing especially well online. According to friends, Brianna had recently started saving money for a used camera and hoped better content could eventually help her grow her account enough to work with local brands and travel companies. That Saturday, she visited the park with two co-workers after hearing the Halloween decorations around the castle area looked especially impressive during sunset. Throughout the afternoon, Brianna constantly stopped to retake photos, adjust angles, and search for locations that made the park appear less crowded in the background. Shortly before sunset, the group entered a dark, fantasy-themed section near one of the park's outdoor roller coasters. The area contained stone towers, artificial fog effects, and an elevated view of the park's main castle structure glowing beneath orange evening light. Brianna immediately became focused on getting a higher angle for photos after noticing crowds blocking most of the pathways. Nearby stood a decorative metal fence bordering a restricted maintenance buffer zone that ran alongside the coaster's final approach track. Warning signs had been attached to sections of the fence, though several were partially hidden behind hanging seasonal decorations and fake vines installed for the Halloween event. Believing she only needed a few seconds to capture the shot, Brianna climbed onto the lower bars of the fence while holding her phone in one hand. Witnesses later said her co-workers appeared nervous and told her to get down, especially after noticing how close the restricted area sat to the coaster track. Her co-workers were nervous. They told her to get down. She laughed and said she was almost done. That laugh is the detail I couldn't shake. Brianna reportedly laughed and said she was almost done before carefully stepping onto the top rail for a better angle. As the coaster approached the final section of track behind her, Brianna leaned outward with her phone fully extended toward the castle skyline, attempting to frame the sunset behind it. As the coaster entered the final approach beside the restricted area, Brianna leaned farther past the fence line with her arm extended into the coaster's clearance zone. Moments later, the side of the passing train and wheel housing struck her arm with devastating force. The impact instantly threw her off balance and sent her falling onto the concrete maintenance path below. The coaster continued moving through its final section, while guests nearby screamed and pointed toward the accident. Park guests initially believed the sound was part of the ride until screaming erupted from people standing closer to the fence line. Emergency responders arrived within minutes and cleared the surrounding area, while horrified visitors were escorted away from the scene. Brianna suffered catastrophic injuries from the impact and blunt force trauma to her upper body and head. She was pronounced dead at the scene. Investigators later recovered her phone beside the maintenance walkway. The final photographs remained saved on the device, including several sunset shots taken moments before the coaster passed behind her. The park temporarily closed the affected section while reviewing safety procedures and signage visibility around restricted areas.